The most successful people in the world all have one thing in common. They've learned how to think big by developing a perspective of possibility. And the good news is, we all have the potential to apply the same strategies to achieve amazing things in our work and lives. Hi, I'm Rob Hartnett, and as your Chief Possibility Officer and host, I'm here to inspire you to become the star of your world as a person of possibility, through learning how people from all areas of life are thinking big and chasing down their dreams. Let's hear from a person of possibility right now. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the It's All Possible podcast. And I'm super excited to have back with us today Mr. Adrian Finglas. And Adrian has had a long and successful sailing career, still going. He's still at the peak of his career. He's had Olympic campaigns, Sydney to Hobart races, national, state, world championships across little Sabot dinghies through to 420s, 470s, 505, Tasars, and of course the mighty Sabre for all you people listening out there from Australia. He's also been, what I love, is as an Olympic coach, and he's a gold and silver medal Olympic coach at the Paralympics, which is just next level to me. And I'm so excited to have him back on, all the way from Brisbane. Adrian, how are you?
Rob, I'm fantastic. Just as you always know, in Queensland, we're dealing with extremes of weather. Today, I'm sitting in about 30 degrees. I've got the air conditioning on, and in the north of our state, in Cairns, there's catastrophic floods. So we're dealing with the extremes.
It's crazy weather in Australia, but we're well known for that. And I had to say, I had this in the back of my mind, Adrian, when I was watching some of the floods, and I thought to myself, God, that's crocodile country up there. And with that, there was a croc going down the main street in one of the towns. Did you suddenly, if you saw that on the news? And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
you don't want to be trying to cross the road in deep water because only Australia, well maybe Florida, but you're going to pick up a nice hungry crocodile going down, wondering where it is and looking for its next meal.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy up there, and there's some amazing stories coming out of the top end of Australia with some heroics. There's people getting saved with mustering helicopters, and people
Yeah.
in small tinny coach boats rescuing people from pubs, etc. So yeah, it's pretty inspirational.
And we thought the rib was just for an opti regatta. It can be used to save a town.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey mate, let's get into it because you're back in Royal Queensland, where you started your sailing. You've had so much success up there, and of course you're from there again. And I've known you more from your strong passion for coaching. To take me back a little bit, where did that passion for coaching come from for you?
Yeah, Rob, interesting. Being born and bred in this town of Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, it's a sports mad city. The climate up here really is great for any sport all year round. So winter, we're out training, summer, you're out training. And my initial passion came from probably playing AFL, Australian football. I was a young fellow, probably started at under 10s and played that game up until under 17s, and had a series of fantastic coaches who really inspired me as a young fellow. And being a kid up here, you play multi-sports, so did a bit of swimming as well. So I got exposed to a bunch of different coaches at a really young age in different sports. So that passion came from all of those different coaches who helped me along the way.
And
And
can you tell me a little bit about what was it about them? Not what
yeah,
would the better coaches do that you really said, yeah, that's really interesting.
yeah, look, I think, Rob, one of the big things I remember my AFL coach, he really cared about the team. So he cared
Right.
about these young lads that he was in charge of, and he was a tough man, but he made sure we were looked after. He made sure that we possessed the basic skills to play that particular game with. He was fantastic. And then, in saying that, also I had my dad, who's still around. He's 89. He was an elite swimmer in his day, and he also had a motorcycling background. So he had this really eclectic view on sport as well. So he was able to guide me a little bit through the coaching. And I think a lot of the passion I've had, I still use a few of the concepts that my dad gave to me. So I think it's just a mixture of those coaches who I were exposed to, their caring nature, their ability to make sure we knew how to play the game with the basic skills.
Yeah, yeah.
And
The fundamental, getting the fundamentals right.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably another coach in this city that had a huge bearing on people in my age group was a guy called Wayne Bennett, and he's a rugby league coach. And Wayne Bennett was very much involved in the media, and he's always on the TV, and you'd see the team's training. And when Wayne was interviewed, you'd always hear about this perfection of the basics. And so, I took that into my sport. And yeah, some of those coaches, they definitely had an impact on myself as a young guy growing up.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Just one of the things you sort of spoke to me about was that, perfection of the basics to getting the fundamentals right, and it's how hard it is to unchange. And interestingly enough, you're talking to me about that, and I learned through neuroscience though that you're spot on. It's actually easier to redo and go towards a new direction than try and change an old habit. And I remember when I got into cycling, it was kind of in the back of my mind. The first thing I wanted to do was I actually contacted a really good coach, and I got to work with Matty Lloyd, who was Olympic and pro on the pro
Yeah,
tour for 10 years, and just happened to be Ross Lloyd's son from North
yeah,
Sales, so
yeah.
and just wanted Matty to say, look, how do you pedal? Where do you stand? And just some really early stuff, and it really does pay dividends if you can get the good stuff early on.
Yeah, I think you look now with some of the sporting achievements around the world with young people, with the internet now, you can see all this stuff on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and it's amazing what some of these young people are achieving across all the range of sports, and they just get exposed to it at a really young age.
Yeah,
Um, I,
yeah.
I, I think
And seeing it in video too, I think helps. I definitely didn't have that, and you might probably had a little bit of it. But seeing video so early on, because you get to so much part of your brain. It's not just audio; it's video, or you can go back and see what it should look like.
Yeah, Rob, that's a really interesting point. I think from my era, we were captivated by books and pictures and reading. You'd look at a picture of Paul Elstrom or whoever it was back then. But today, all the young people can click on Instagram or TikTok and they can see the world's best. All the great athletes in our sport of sailing, they've all got their Instagram page full of their training and what they're doing and what they're up to in the gym. And so I've found the young people acquire the skills a lot quicker now, just with the amount of social media they're watching. And
Yeah,
so,
it's a really good point, isn't it? I always find that I always found it when I was with my boys that we'd have a problem. First thing I'd do is I'd go to Google,
yep,
they would go to YouTube and TikTok. That
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
literally in the moment, and then they would be so more advanced than I was. But that was their default, and it was the right default, by the way, was to
yep,
go to visual and auditory and get that whole kinesthetic approach. As to me, stumbling through, and so I was shifted to do that as well. But that's the beauty of hanging around with young people. Hey, I want to talk about one coach though before we jump right into what you're doing now. There's another coach that was a fantastic coach, which is Mike Fletcher. Tell me about Mike Fletcher and how you got to work with Mike Fletcher, and what were some good things about Mike?
yeah. Well, I think as we know, Mike's the god of coaching in this country. He started it all. Mike is now in his late 80s, I believe, still going and still doing a little bit of coaching. Uh, Mike, we were exposed to Mike at a young age. I was 15 years old when I first was coached by Mike. He'd come up and do some state squad coaching events. And I think the big thing that stood out with Mike was he would make sure we knew a lot about the technical aspects of the sport. Mike's a very bright man, pattern maker by trade. So he's very mathematical. And Mike would draw all these crazy drawings on our whiteboards back then, and it was apparent wind and true wind, and he'd have all the technical stuff mapped out for us young people, and he made sure that we understood that information. Mike would have a series of back then it was photocopied sheets with depth and angle of attack and rigging and spreader angles, etc. So from a very young age, all of the people I grew up with, we just had this huge amount of information coming through from Mike, real technical stuff. And I still default to a lot of that information today. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
he,
Mike also was he also called a spade a spade.
oh, absolutely. I remember I was sailing a 470 with my great mate, Mark Bradford, who's now the president of North Sales. And Mike told us one stage there we were wasting our time. And, and, we can look back now as 50-year-olds and go, you know what, we sort of were for a while because we were too small. And
Right, right.
Mark and I weren't the right weight for the class at the time, and we were, you know, crazily trying to put on weight. We had weight jackets back then, but he was spot on. We were too small for that period of time, and he did tell it how it was.
Yeah.
But one of the great things with Mike, he'd give you a set of skills that you had to go and practice. And I think one of the things that I think's better with that era of coaching was it was very athlete driven. So the coach would give you some things to work on. You'd go away and work on them, and then you'd touch base in another 3 or 4 months. Today's athlete, it's contact every day of the week. And sometimes I think the message is a little bit lost. So I actually prefer some of the older methods of coaching.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, isn't it? There's a concept in neuroscience I picked up called ARIA. It's ARIA, and
Yep,
it's awareness, right? So you get awareness from someone like Mike, and then
yep,
it's reflection is the R, and the I is the insight that you have, and the last A is the action you take.
yep,
Right. And so sometimes people can get it in the moment, but sometimes you need to have the awareness of a new concept or a new idea that someone like Mike's given you, and you need to go away. And we all operate at different speeds in different things. And you need sometimes to have that reflection and go, you might go, oh, it's bullshit. Or actually, or that's kind of fun. Actually, what if I added that plus that and I get the answer and you have that insight? And I think that's sometimes I think the pace of life, the speed, the instant gratification, you got to have that instant skill is something I think it's a really good point that sometimes it does take time and that's okay as well.
yeah. I think that time thing, it's really critical. I think in today's fast-paced world, as coaches, often we don't give enough time for the athletes to find their new skill. But I'm going to say, back in the olden days, when I came through the program, we had that time, and the coach was just touching base with us irregularly. So yeah, I found that a lot better method for me personally to acquire the skills. You'd go and work on it and become a coach yourself. You had to nut it out a little bit.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, and it's a nice little segue into my next question, which is around, some of you're coaching, a wide variety of age groups at the moment, but groups who are absolutely exposed to social media, to instant gratification, to instant results. What does a coach today have to bring to the table? What are some, say, top three qualities a coach has to bring today that may be a little bit different than Mike's era?
yeah, well, I think the qualities of the coaches are the same. You know, you got to care for the athletes. Um, you've got to love the athletes. You know, you've got to really nurture them, be compassionate for them to progress. I think if you don't have those qualities towards your athletes, the athletes, they won't take up the challenge. So you've got to really show those athletes that you're invested in the program as much as they are, or even more than they are. I think maybe we talked back a while ago, Rob. I've got this saying: if the coach isn't 120% invested, the athlete's got no chance. So the coach has got to be invested more than the athlete for the athlete to succeed. That's what
Yeah,
I personally believe. What a coach has to bring today, you've got to be quite social media savvy, I think. You know, I've had to learn TikTok and Instagram and all these things. We've got a whole lot of new devices that we can bring to the table. Drones, for example, all of that stuff makes the
hmm
job a lot easier. Um, but I think the old ways just haven't changed. You got to look after the people you're asking to do incredible things,
yeah.
and so yeah, you
Well, I
you got to
think you've
live.
done a good job. I've seen, been following you on social media and the like. I think one of the funniest ones I saw was that I'm not sure when it was, but I saw one of your coachees, one laser sailor, was so distracted by a pre-start. She actually sailed her boat on board your coach boat. Is that right?
Yes,
She
yeah.
tried to take you out.
Yeah. That's a great young athlete from Brisbane here, Francis Beebe. Francis was going through a standard warm up drill. It's called a figure eight, and she just lost track and ended up perched on my coach boat. And it actually made my day, and it made her day. We had a laugh about it, and then we moved on. But yeah, some of those things that you go through with the athletes that really make the journey quite special.
Well, I'm just glad she was in a laser, not a falling moth, because she would have cut you in half, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
She got distracted.
the
Now
coach boat.
you're just back from South Sydney, and South Sydney had some very. I wasn't up there, but what I heard some very tricky conditions. There was a big windy days and light days, and a lot going on up there. When you've got really changeable conditions like that, what's your advice to the athletes, when they're going out in the water, when you're expecting like a massively big northerly or hot wind or something that might die out completely? So these big changeable conditions, so they keep their mindsets focused. What are some of the things you would guide them with?
Yeah, I think, Rob, just really quickly, I actually wasn't there, but I had a lot of athletes there.
Right.
Yeah, one of the things I think with venues like Sydney or any harbour
Mm.
environment or changeable environments, we always start the day off with looking at the weather map and looking at what the conditions may be, and then having a look at the topography of the course, and that then sets you up. Well, how am I going to play the game? How do I sail the boat? Is it a day where I've got to sail fast into the shift, or is it a flat water day where I can sheet harder and point a little bit higher? So that morning briefing regards the weather, it becomes the thing that you're going to default to as the day goes on. Um, One of the things about a typical Sydney um, mindset is you got to be prepared for everything. You know, you might have a flying boat plane, you might have a ferry, an oil tanker, you might have an army ship. So you've just got to roll with the punches in Sydney Harbour. And, if you are back in the fleet, it doesn't really mean too much for that moment of time, because in a matter of minutes, you could be back in amongst the leaders. So you just got to take 1 minute at a time on Sydney Harbour.
Adrian, you reminded me of Sydney Harbour. I remember doing a J24 midwinters or something. It was a Middle Harbour series up there, and I remember the only time this has ever happened in a yacht race, which is spot on, was going downwind. I yelled at the before deckhand who was looking backwards for gusts. I said, "We got to jibe now," and he goes, "No, there's no need to, man. It's all right." Well, I said, "No, we need to jibe now," and he's
Yep.
like, and I'm pleading with him, and the rest of the guys are ready to go, and he's going, "No, we go. Forget the shift. Turn around." We had a submarine come up.
Yeah.
It actually went up in the middle of the fleet. There was a bit of a break between the first five and the rest of us, and we were leading the rest of us. I've never ever had that. So expect the unexpected in Sydney Harbour.
Yeah, Sydney Harbour, you just don't know what's going to happen. And it could be an old historical 18-foot skiff boat could capsize in front of you, and all the people might fall out. You might have to rescue someone.
Right.
You just never know what's going to happen. So you've got to have that very level mindset, be prepared for anything, and you know, sailing on Sydney Harbour's it's always a great day because it's so unique.
Yeah.
You get to see the Opera House and the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and there's never a bad day sailing on
No,
Sydney
that's
Harbour.
it. And I really like that mindset. Let's say you're off the start line, you come off on the pin end, you're looking golden, and it's a 30-degree shift, and it's not going your way. What a lot of people collapse at that point. A lot of people, all of a sudden the emotion takes over, the reptilian brain kicks in at
Yeah.
that point. That stuff is going to happen. What's your coaching advice, and what do you say to athletes who when that happens, or what should they do at that particular point?
Yeah, I think, Rob, my suggestion to the athletes is just, take a deep breath, realize that the situation has happened, and just default to the minimize the risk situation. So minimize the distance that you're going to possibly lose, get back into the race, and don't worry too much about it. A lot of the younger athletes find that type of concept hard to grasp. It does take a few years to be able to go, oh, well, the shift hasn't gone our way, or, that big oil tank has gone between us and the rest of the fleet. And yeah, it's something that does take some years of being involved in sport. And probably you see this in other sports like football. You see the younger players, they might have an emotional outburst in the grand final, then they get red carded. It comes with time. So
Yeah. Is
yeah,
that time, or just
so
time in the boat and regattas?
probably it's that time in the boat and a bit of age and wisdom to be able to realise that you know not every decision's going to go our way. So we just got to roll with the punches a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I've always been fascinated, and I can't say I've been the greatest at that, at that maturity, but I've learned from people like you. And I remember asking as a Sale Melbourne regatta, and Tom Burton. I saw Tom Burton start in the lasers, that's exactly what happened to him. And I went, oh my God, this is going to be a shocker. I was just looking at it, and then I was focusing on other things. And
Yeah.
I saw him after the race, and I was kind of like went over to him, and I was like, how did you go? And he goes, yeah. I said, just start was, and he goes, yeah, it went right. I just wasn't expecting it, and everything else said would go left, and it went right.
Yeah.
And I said, so how'd you end up? And he goes, oh, I won,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
deep dive with him. I said, fantastic, congratulations. How did you respond? And he had a really good point. And I think you'd appreciate it. He just said, I realized where I was. I realized I wasn't going to be leading around the top mark.
Yeah.
And so he said, what could I do? I had to get back in the race. And so I aimed for, it was a big fleece. So I think I aimed for top 30 by the top mark.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was really interesting. And he went on from there, and, it just worked out leg by leg in terms of advancing, bringing it forward. But yeah, I think it is that maturity, isn't it, to be able to keep calm and realize, if there's been one swing, and maybe there's going to be a swing back, but just needing that sense of calm in your mind. Otherwise, you can go off on a tangent.
Yeah, and just stick to the basic core principles. Stay on the lifted tack. Even though you might be way back in the fleet, it hasn't gone your way. Let's just stay on that lifted tack. And when you get round the top mark, it's stay on the headed jibe, and keep looking for that really important. I call it fuel these days. I don't call it wind. So I've changed my mindset
I love it.
around. Yeah. I've changed my mindset about how I talk about the wind.
Yeah.
I never talk about puffs anymore in the
Right.
coaching environment. I talk about the fuel.
The
And
fuel.
so, yeah. And so I've found young people, they resonate with that a little bit better. So I'm always talking about, you need the best fuel. You got to find the best fuel on the race
Right.
course.
Right.
So,
It's a really
yeah.
good. It's a really nice analogy too, isn't it? If you got the best quality fuel too, as your father would know from his
Yeah.
motorcycle racing, makes a heck of a difference as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, and I use that analogy a lot, Rob, about car fuel and how a car performs when you put poor fuel in it. And I say to our athletes now, I say, if you're using poor fuel, poor wind, you just can't compete.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a different way of looking at it. Just a bit of a change up of words, but I found it's had a great impact on the delivery of the message.
Well, it all helps. As I used to do a bit of motocross racing with my oldest Ben in the day, and let me tell you, the quality of fuel was a game changer when you were running sort of high performance two strokes. It didn't matter how far you wrapped it on. If the other guy had better fuel quality than you did, they got to the first corner first. It was as simple
Yeah.
as that. And
Yep.
us fathers clearly worked out who the petroleum companies are that did have it. I won't talk about it here, but there was one particular company had way better fuel than
Yep.
others, and it was an absolute must-have. It just was a fundamental. You just could not have this particular fuel in the bike. So I reckon it's a great analogy. Hey, look, I love the things you're doing. You're changing up that. You're also very passionate about youth sailing as well. And you've built quite a big team at RQ. Take us through what you're doing at RQ and some of the team you've built around you up there.
Yeah. Well, Rob, back in my home ground, Brisbane, taken a while to get back there. I was 10 years in Melbourne, and that I had to go on that journey for 10 years in Melbourne, and was exposed to a lot of great people down there. But now I'm back in my hometown. So it's really exciting with the 232 Olympics coming up, which will be in Brisbane. We don't have long. And so one of the mandates from my club is we've got to get people back in the Olympic team. Not that at a club level we do that, but we're nurturing all the new talent coming through. So I'm really urgent about one, instilling some really good culture in these young people at the moment, making sure they've got that technical information like the Mike Fletcher helped me out in the young days, and just making sure they've got that passion, and I've ignited the fire and the dream about the Olympics. And once you ignite the dream with a group of young people, you don't have to do too much. They'll go away and they start to train like crazy amounts, and next minute the skill level comes up. So yeah, back in Brisbane, I've got a huge team there we call it the academy, and we've got a group of about 35 young instructor slash coaches, and that takes care of everything from learn to sail right through to coaching at the elite level.
That's pretty good, Adrian. I mean, I like the way you call it the academy. I think branding is really important. I think, as you know, I love the way you've done that. But 35, that's a solid team.
Yeah, look, Rob, it's pretty insane what we churn through every day of the week. The team has 4 people in the office. Have an amazing lady, Dominique, who runs that program. Dom makes sure all those instructors and coaches are booked in for the week, and all the programs are booked in. We've got a huge amount of school children coming through from all the different local schools. And we try to make sure that all those young children know that the Olympics are going to be in town. So, with under 10 years to go now, a 9-year-old who you're dealing with at Learn to Sail at school could be an Olympic athlete. So, I've got my eye on the pulse pretty much from the Learn to Sail level, and I'm on the lookout all the time for these young kids. We've got a huge group of, say, 12 to 14-year-olds at the moment who are sailing all different types of boats, and they're possibly going to be the young children who take on the Olympic dream and actually get there. So, yeah, we're making sure they know all about the Olympics.
That's fantastic. I'm going to say Royal Queensland Yacht Squadron is still one of my favourites, and I think still one of the best clubs in the world. Lisa and I were in the US in June, and we visited a number of clubs in California. And there were some great clubs we went to, but you come back to Australia and RQ, Royal Prince Alfred, Sandringham, just on a par globally. In terms of great clubs, and RQ with its facilities is great. What about you? You've been a little bit talking about this on Facebook, and it's a global phenomenon. That's a real challenge at the moment. How are we keeping the kids in the boats from were they doing Sabots, Optis, Minnows, whatever state you're in? How do we keep them up that next level? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think at the moment in our state, we've got the little Opti as our learner, and then we branched out into a bunch of different little boats. We've got the Laser 4.7, a new little boat called a Fever, which is a plastic rotomolded boat, really cost effective for the families to get involved in. Then we have the 29er. We've got an amazing sailboard program as well, and we're just on the hunt to start our wing foil program as well. That's
Right.
going to be front and center very quickly. But one of the things that we make sure is not to overcoach these kids and get into the nitty gritty of racing too early. We've got a great green fleet program that we make sure the kids have a lot of fun. And along that way, we're also trying to educate the parents. We've got a lot of parents now who are taking up the sport of sailing who weren't sailors. So they've come to the club, they've come to the program, and I've got another great coach who works alongside me, a volunteer coach, Simon Tribe. Simon's a Englishman, and Simon's super passionate about helping parents get sailing, because when the parents are invested in the sport, the children tend to stay. And so I'm so lucky to have Simon's passion in that space. And I think coming back into this space of coaching and working at a big facility, I had to realize and change a little bit that my energy and I can't do everything. So what I've had the great ability to have this great network of people around me, and I just let them do their thing. I definitely do my thing, but I just let them grow the parents, and that we got some amazing junior coaches who are growing the green fleet in our Opti space, and I just let them go about their work, and I do guide them a little bit along the way. But the program's too big for someone like myself to take it on wholly and solely. So yeah,
That's a great point, Adrian. I think the parents one's a really interesting one, because you also can't make assumptions. You don't know that the parents coming in, their aspirations, their capabilities to. And I've seen this locally, certainly at Sandringham, and even when I was selling, I might have sold an Opti, whether Lockheed's Optis or Fins, and I'd always ask the parents, what do you know? And sometimes I'd see them gazing around at Sandringham or Sorrento or somewhere, and you could see them taking interest, and I go, well, where are you going to join, or what are you going to do? And I got to tell you, 9 times out of 10, it was like, well, I'm not really sure yet. And I'd spend, half an hour selling the boat, and the other hour and a half giving them a tour of the yacht club. And And you'd be surprised that, some of their capability and capacity to buy a boat, to do something else, and suddenly they're doing a twilight race or something like
Yeah.
that, and they're enjoying themselves as a family, and suddenly the club becomes a family destination, not
Yep.
just either a drop-off point like some of the surf life savings become basically like a crash.
Yep.
I think I think you're onto something with that.
Yeah, we're definitely trying not to have the drop and go mentality. One of the very simple things we introduced this year with some of our laser team, and it's now gone across all of our fleets, but the good old barbecue. So our amazing volunteer parents, they cook a barbecue in the morning. So at 8 o'clock, when the kids turn up, there's a bacon and egg roll there waiting for each one of those children's. And that was something that our dad and I talked about. We got it off the ground. The parents supplied the labour and the purchasing of the bacon and eggs, but it was just a huge success. And then when the kids came in off the water, we had a hot dog there ready for them to go as well. And just that simple old Aussie barbecue really brought the team together. So now we're finding that all of our little fleets, 29ers, 4.7s, and our Opties are all doing that each weekend that they have a big event on. And it's brought a lot of camaraderie to the club.
That's
And
fantastic. I think you've got it at both ends there. You got the juniors coming through. You got the barbecue and the community kind of egg and bacon rolls. I feel like getting one myself right now. You've said that,
yeah,
but you've got the top end, and I really love that. Also, that goals, that 9-year plan. I was really fascinated reading about that. And as you said, it's under 10 years now, and that sort of 9-year-old could be in the Olympics. So I think that's the kind of RQ32 goal. It's always nice to have that. What Google called a moonshot, the kind of moonshot that's out 9 years, but you've got
yep.
great stuff happening at the grassroots level as well.
Yeah, Rob, and we work closely with Australian Sailing next door. We've got the Queensland Academy of Sport. So one of my passions is to make sure when I pass the athletes up to the next level from a club perspective, I want to make sure they're skilled and they're knowledgeable, so that the QAS then, or the Queensland Academy of Sport, have got really good fodder and really good athletes to take on the next part of the journey. So we're all working together as a state to try to make sure someone will represent the state at the 32 games.
Yeah, and will those 32 games for sailing be held out of RQ? Is that the kind of goal?
No, I don't think so. It's probably too big for our facility. There's discussion about we might help out in some ways, but it'll be held in the harbour precinct there.
Right.
The state government, I think, is talking about some other land and some other options.
Okay.
But it's, as you know, the Olympic Games, it's a huge circus, and it needs a lot of land and a lot of resources. So even though you think our facility's big, it needs a bigger sort of space to probably run. But our club will definitely be front and center with the lead up to the games, with countries flying in and using our place as a base. And I think, especially for myself, it'll be an awesome way to end my career.
I think you've got so much more to give, Adrian. I'm so glad you're up where you are, up in Queensland and back there again. It's one of my favourite places, and I think you're just the guy to take it to the next level. I think you'll be going on a few more years past that.
Oh,
I think you will. Hey, been great chatting to you, Adrian, again. So much rich gold in what we spoke about, and so happy you could join us and get it in before Christmas. This will probably come out a little bit after Christmas, but happy Christmas to you and your family as well.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And just to all the listeners out there, if I can say anything, just get out there and practice. And, if you start training 2 or 3 days a week, next minute it'll turn into 5 days a week, and next minute you'll be on that podium. So have a crack. Life's short.
Beautiful. Thanks, Adrian.
Okay, Rob.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the It's All Possible podcast. You can contact me at rob@robhartnett.com, or my website, robhartnett.com, or on LinkedIn. Remember to check out the previous seasons and episodes of the podcast and the show notes for more details on this episode's guest. For more inspiration, remember to check out the It's All Possibility playlist on Spotify, which contains a collection of upbeat, positive music I use for inspiration in my live performances. Until next time, live with passion and a perspective of possibility.